Can you tell the difference between this fake pair of Nike shoes and these? What about whether this painting, verified by Salvador Dali himself, is actually real? Chances are pretty high Bernard Ewell can.
Oh my gracious.
Ewell calls himself the Dali detective. He's vetted over 50,000 Salvador Dali works of art.
People will say, do you know a Dali fake when you see it? And I'll say, I almost always do immediately.
Dali was one of the most famous artists in history and one of the most forged. But his paintings have been ripped off so many times that it's kept Bernard Ewell in business for over 40 years. Forged Dali prints flooded the market during the 80s. But why? Well, Dali made it kinda easy to rip off his work, whether he realized it or not.
By 1980, I had been developing myself as an appraiser for 8 years. I'd done all the different mediums, I'd carved the different stones, I'd done printmaking with all the different mediums there. I don't think any other appraiser's ever done all that, but I was training myself and I traveled to study with other people. I also was learning all about painting and restoration and of course running a frame shop. So basically I was training myself, and by 1980 I had a pretty active practice in Colorado Springs where I lived, around the state, and was starting to go out of state because I was really the only certified appraiser, certified by the American Society of Appraisers at that time, in several states, especially New Mexico and Colorado. So, a woman brought to my office in Colorado Springs 3 Salvador Dali lithographs. I'd never done anything with Salvador Dali. I was doing a wide range of European and American art. But I took a look at these prints, and because I had done lithography, I knew what the surface of them should look like. And this didn't look right. They came with lots and lots of documentation from Center Art Gallery, Hawaii. And I looked at that documentation and I shook my head and I said, these prints are not what these documents say they are. These are a form of photomechanical reproduction of an artwork, not original lithographs themselves. So in doing the research, I called the gallery, Center Art Gallery, Hawaii. And the guy I talked to there was the president. I was really amused later to find out that he was the former assistant to the law dean at the University of Wisconsin and a lawyer. But here he was running an art gallery, and eventually we'd send him to jail. I didn't know that at the time, of course. Anyway, I talked to him and he said, you got a problem? Talk to my lawyer. So I called his lawyer in New York. And the lawyer, no, I'm sorry, he said, call the publisher. That's it. And I called the publisher, and the publisher said, you got a problem? You call my lawyer. So I called the lawyer in New York, and the lawyer basically said, mind your own business. I was hooked. I had to find out what the story was here. And I'll just tell you that later, I testified in opposition to that attorney in a number of federal cases, and sent that publisher to jail and sent that dealer and his vice president to jail. So this is who I was dealing with, but of course at the time I didn't know that. But in doing the research, I really figured out how these prints had been done, and by 1987, I was looking at all the Dali prints I could find. I was talking to everybody who might be able to help me, and they all said, stay out of it, Bernard. Can of worms is dangerous. The mafia's involved. Don't get into that. Nobody really knows. Well, by 1987, I had developed myself as the only person who could tell the difference between the real prints and the forgeries. And that's when the prosecutions began. A major prosecution right here in New Mexico. I was living in Colorado, but right here in New Mexico, the Assistant Attorney General, Fred Smith, prosecuted 2 brothers who had 43 galleries scattered around the Southwest selling fake Salvador Dali prints. I got a hold of CBS News. Mike Wallace brought a team in and did a story during that trial. I'm not listed, and I don't appear because I was an expert witness for the state government. So I'm not in it, but I was able to tell Mike who everybody was and tie up all the different personalities and help them put the story together. And I think the first federal case I did was for the Federal Trade Commission. I ended up doing a number of cases for them all around the country. Those, of course, were federal prosecutions for art fraud. Worked for several state attorneys general doing the same thing. Was hired by the Attorney General of Wisconsin not only to come and check out a gallery, but then to stay around for a while writing art law that would identify the parameters within which an art dealer could sell prints. Basically, what the art dealer was required to tell the buyer at the point of sale. And then I testified to a committee of the state legislature. They passed my legislation, and then it went to the national level and was adopted by most of the states. And I've been rolling on Salvador Dali ever since, right to the point of a little over 58,000 prints and a couple of thousand unique works. I have more fun than anybody else I know.
I have met several appraisers, worked with appraisers, have received appraisers, and I must tell you that once I did go over the examination, the opinion of value, the appraisal that Mr. Bernard had put together for the Cosmic Madonna, I was blown away. I was just not sure what to make of it, as this was so precise in so many levels, in so many aspects of the art business. Such an evaluation that covered all areas of a painting.
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, mostly, but a very, very important part of my development was the 3 years from 1950 through 1953 that my family lived in northern England, while my father was the managing director of the British subsidiary of his corporation. When we first went to England, I had no concept of there being such a thing as a foreign country, or other cultures, or other languages, or even different ways of saying the same things I was saying, the British accents and such. So it was a big shock for me. School was pretty much hell. The weekends were wonderful because I was out climbing around castles. And I really developed a love of history from that point in my life right through to my PhD in history and today, because I have written or pulled together an 11-page chronology of all the historical events that happened right here. So that is a trend throughout my life. When I was 14, at my mother's suggestion, she stayed home while my father traveled, and he took me with him. So I was in Europe, a little bit in the Middle East too, 3 or 4 times a year with him. And typically we would have breakfast in the hotel, kinds of hotels I could never stay in again, or afford to stay in again. And he would say, well, I'm going to be at the factory all day today, or I'm going to be at the office, and they're going to do a dinner dance for me tonight. So I'll be back here about 11 o'clock. It'd be nice if you were here. And he'd go to work. And Rome would be mine, or Cairo, or Beirut, or Paris, or Geneva. Wherever we were, I was totally free, usually for about 3 days, to roam the city. And I thought that when you travel, you do things like go to art museums. So I always did. And cathedrals. So I always did. But I also developed this process of pretty much memorizing a city. So I knew after looking at a map where I was in relationship to everything else. And then I added to that the really, really rewarding practice of following my nose, following my ears. For instance, if I smelled turpentine, I might sort of follow the smell through an archway. Just, like I'm thinking specifically of one example behind the Duomo in Firenze in Florence. Through an archway into a courtyard, and then up the steps to the second level, and I ended up in a gold leafing studio. Or I would hear a hammer on a chisel, and I would end up in a sculpting studio. And people were wonderful. A kid comes in and he's curious and he wants to know what's going on here. They were wonderful about bringing me in, showing me what I was doing, frequently showing me the techniques they were using and having me practicing, putting the tools in my hands. So that was an incredible education. The museums, the architecture, the history, and these, present day experiences. So when I went to college, I had no thought of a career in the arts. I had plenty of that behind me because three of my grandparents were professional artists and museum administrators. My mother was an artist. I'd helped her teach at the Cincinnati Art Museum. I'd spent a lot of time in the basement of the Chicago Art Institute with my grandfather, Dr. Sir Dudley Crafts Watson, who was administrator at the Art Institute. So I had all that art background and all that experience in Europe behind me. And I wasn't really thinking about putting all that together for a career. So I went through my PhD studies in history, primarily focusing on European colonial history and African history. And spent time at, I got my undergraduate degree from Ohio University, master's degree from the University of Cincinnati, because that's where my father lived, my parents lived, and once a week I could get on a corporate plane and spend the day doing research in the Library of Congress or Columbia or Boston University, wherever I needed to do it. So that was wonderful. Then I went to the University of Florida for PhD work. They didn't have all that I wanted because by then I was really focusing on African art and African cultures. So I went to the University of London briefly, School of African and Oriental Studies, and then to the University of Ghana in West Africa. That was a huge influence on me because the first day sitting in a classroom for a lecture, I thought, wait a minute, I've been doing this for 8 years. All of Africa's out there. So I negotiated with all my professors who all went along with my plan, and I didn't go to any classes. I'd been doing that all those years, and I'd pretty much met all of my academic requirements short of the dissertation at that point. So I spent all that time out hitchhiking back and forth across 5 West African countries, sleeping on dirt floors, sitting in the smoke of the fire at night, dancing every night, drinking palm wine with people, and really absorbing the culture. And that was a pretty wonderful experience. And then when I got back to the university after each trip, usually 3 to 5 days, I'd go around and see all the professors, and they'd be quizzing me on who I'd met, what I'd learned, where I was going next, and they'd say, oh, you're going to Koforichua and then over to Takoradi? Oh, you stop and see this person here and that person there. So I was sort of doing directed research. The biggest adventure was when I fled in the night from Nigeria with the help of an army major, his driver, and the car, because it was during the Biafran War. And basically at 21 years of age, wearing blue jeans, an army surplus jacket, and a beard, I looked pretty much like the mercenaries that were down in Igbo land, killing the sons and the fathers and the husbands of the people I was among. So it was very, very uncomfortable. So I fled Nigeria in the night with his help, and there were some adventures along the way with that, I assure you.
Yeah, it was really just a lot of really unique experiences that not very many people get to have, and he really made sure that Duncan and I had those opportunities to get out and experience really unique things, and that made it really fun. Happy birthday, Dad. I can't believe it's 80 years. I haven't been there for all of it, but for certainly over half of it, and it's been quite a ride up till this point, and you've got a whole lot more adventures ahead of you, and I hope we are part of some of those. So enjoy your day today, and I'm glad that we can be with you and celebrating you, and here's to a wonderful year ahead.
Some of the funnest times I've had with him are probably at his house. I love running in the arroyos, and whenever we went on our little walks together, he'd tell me about the arroyos and show me all his cool places. He'd show me the coyote dens where they used to be, and I loved just exploring the arroyos. And I remember one of my favorite times exploring the arroyos was he'd take us to this one arroyo that had all this petrified wood, and we'd pick it up and we'd look at it and he'd show us. And I was young back then, and that was just super cool, finding all these cool rocks that he then told me were actually just wood but petrified. It kind of amazed me, and those moments are just so good in my memory.
We really liked going to experiential art, so Meow Wolf has been really fun to go to. Just things that we can both get into and have a lot of fun in, and both be like, oh, that's the thing, that's the one. And then we can go home and be like, did you see? And we'd be like, I did. Happy 80th birthday. It's been great to have 17 years with you. It's going to be great to have a bunch more. I love you lots.
Hey there, just wishing you a happy birthday, happy 80th. What a big number. So glad we've made it this far, and proud of you and all you've done, and super excited to spend the day with you celebrating. So yeah, congratulations, happy birthday. Best of luck in this next phase of your life, and love you lots, and super excited to get to spend some time celebrating with you here in the States. So much love to you, and happiest of birthdays.
Hi Bernard, I'm thrilled to wish you a very happy birthday on behalf of all of us in the Santa Fe Symphony family who love you and appreciate you. I'm so glad you were born, not least of which because I got to meet you as a part of our work together on the symphony, and you and Sally have just been such great welcoming influences to me over the last 2 years with the Santa Fe Symphony. So I always look forward to seeing you at our concerts, at our events. I feel like you are one of our biggest cheerleaders, and I hope you have a birthday that's just as special as you are.
Sally lives in histrionics and chaos. She's very smart. She's incredibly creative. You give her a couple of ideas and she's going to find some way to put them together. She's going to find some way to put people together. She's going to find some way to think of things like fundraisers for the symphony, or how to help this, that, or the other organization. And it's always really brilliant ideas, the kind that most people wouldn't come up with, including myself. But when you hear them, you say, yeah, that could work.
Hey, Bernard. This is Nishoni, your best friend. And I'm always really excited to see you come home. You can tell from my tale. And I like to stand watch for coyotes night and day from your patio. When it comes to nighttime, I love to keep your bed warm, and sometimes I even sleep with you. You know, you are my best pal for my entire life.
Well, I've lived in Santa Fe for 11 years, and I've visited pueblos, and I've been out to Cuba and beyond, and on various reservations and so on. But a visit to the Santo Domingo Pueblo with Bernard to see his adopted family. Angie and her family was a life-changing experience. Bernard is that kind of a guy. He will corral you into one of his adventures, and it will be life-changing. So that's a pretty unique quality, and he's a pretty unique guy, and this is a time to celebrate his 8th decade.
Happy birthday, Brother B, my twin brother. I love you. Let's reach 100th birthday.
First off, Bernard, happy 80th birthday. I know you're excited to make it to this milestone event, and we're all very happy for you. Many more to come, my dear friend. So one of the most memorable and fun events was attending a Christmas party at your house a few years ago, and you and Sally had brought back a piñata of Donald Trump, and we all got a turn out in your back 40 beating on it. And when I took a good swing at it, I was hoping to beat many of himself and his trolls into submission. Well, obviously, as we can see today, that didn't quite happen. So onward and upward, wishing for the best. Love you, my friend, and look forward to celebrating with you. Have a great one. Bye.
Yes, it's the crazy lady you lived with for the last 10 years, and I'm standing in front of Tosco and your view of your grandfather, Sir Dudley's wonderful art studio where you took me, and when you bought me this wonderful necklace of the meander. Oh, you've taught me so much. A love of Mexico and Ireland and all the places we've been. And also, the most important thing is you introduced me to carencia, which is being one with nature and a love of all animals and observing and being one with them. And I have loved being in the canyon with you and loved all those things, except I don't think I'll ever get into the mice and the ants and the spiders and the snakes. But I do love the symphonies and opera. You've taught me so many things about music and an appreciation for life in a whole different way. A family, grandchildren, a pack, Nashoni and Bodhi, the dog and cat. It was a wonderful, wonderful time, and it has been. Thank you. I'm glad you were born. Happy birthday.
I think age is wonderful. I think experience is wonderful. I wouldn't ever want to go back to being as clueless as I was then. I'm clueless enough now. Thank you very much. But I love everything I've learned. I love the experience that I've had. I've loved the fact that I can look at a situation or meet someone and very, very quickly discern where the values are, if there's integrity or not, etc. And you learn to listen to your voices, your internal voices, to whatever you want to call it. And if something doesn't feel right, you learn it's probably better not to do it. That is a huge reward.